Hello, I'm Dr. Joel Klenck, an archaeologist trying to prevent a cultural atrocity, the total destruction of Noah's Ark by decomposition due to melting glacial ice and permafrost and the continual looting of the site. Noah's Ark is so prominent in Armenian culture, and their old maps show the location of Noah's Ark. Another method to find historic properties that archaeologists use is to study iconography, such as historic maps, paintings, any iconography that would provide clues to the location of a property. In this case, Noah's Ark, the most important structure ever. So now what we're going to do is discuss old Armenian maps that again focus on the Southern Gorge of Greater Mount Ararat and the approach to Noah's Ark. Here's from a previous discussion, you've seen this before. Here's a satellite view of the southern side of Mount Ararat showing the Southern Gorge, marked with a red dot in the center. Here's an example of a European map showing Mount Ararat. And note, there are two observations I want you to note. First is the display of the Southern Gorge on the south side of Mount Ararat. And the Southern Gorge extends from the bottom to the top of Mount Ararat, and then Noah's Ark is at the top of the gorge. And this is repeated again and again and again in the iconography that we're going to see. Here's a map by Thomas Burnet. It was entitled Concerning the Deluge and the Dissolution of the Earth. This was first published in Latin as Telluras Theora Sacra in 1681 and 1689, and then published again in English in 1684 and 1689. And here you see Noah's Ark at the top of Mount Ararat, but descending or emerging from the bottom, traveling all the way to the top of the mountain, is the Southern Gorge. And again, Noah's Ark is at the top of that Southern Gorge. Here is a very famous map that was made around 1680 by Nicolaes Visscher II, who lived between 1649 and 1702. He was a Dutch cartographer, and he was the third of his generation. And what was so instrumental about the Vischers is that they really focused on biblical themes. And this is a map of the Near East that they created. But what's interesting about this is that you're going to see two types of iconography repeated again and again in the iconography of Noah's Ark. First is the gorge that descends from the bottom to the top of Mount Ararat. But also what you see is that Noah's Ark is not on the top of Mount Ararat. Rather, it's in a flat area beneath the summit of Mount Ararat. And I hope you can see that. But you're going to see these two types of iconographies repeated again and again. Now, here's a map of Armenia in Armenian, published in Venice in 1752, again showing the mountain of Ağrı, Greater Mount Ararat, with the gorge, the Southern Gorge, going from the bottom to the top of the mountain, and with Noah's Ark resting on top of the Southern Gorge. Here's another example, a map of Greater Mount Ararat showing the Southern Gorge, and you can see it emerges from the bottom to the top of the mountain, and then at the top of the Southern Gorge you have Noah's Ark. And this was published between 1784 and 1786. Now here's an Armenian map portraying Greater Mount Ararat, Ağrı, and again you can see the Southern Gorge at the bottom, going from the bottom to the very top of the mountain. And here it's interesting because the bow of the vessel is sticking forward and the rear of the vessel is sticking back into the mountain, and we're going to see how applicable or appropriate this is. Now here's a contemporary Armenian iconography that I think is very instructive. It shows the southern extent of, it shows the southern extent of the mountain, but it has that wonderful southern gorge going from the very bottom to the very top. But also what's instrumental is that it shows that it's not one uniform gorge, but there's different ridges. There's at least 2 ridges as you go from east, or from west to east. And then beyond the second ridge, there's the symbol of the Holy Spirit, the dove, which is sacred iconography to Christians. And this will be very applicable when we talk about Noah's Ark. Now, this is a painting of Saint Mesrop Mashtots by Grigor Khanjian, who was probably the best painter, the best Armenian painter, who lived between 1926 and died in 2000. He was the premier painter of Armenia. And here he paints something very interesting. This is a painting of King Trdat and Saint Gregory the Illuminator, are all standing in front of holy Mount Ararat with the Armenian letter I. And from the Armenian letter, there's a point or a line that is descending to where Noah's Ark is positioned. And note where it is positioned. It's noted not on the top of the summit of Mount Ararat, but in a flat area beneath the summit of Greater Mount Ararat. And this is very instrumental. The letter I in the Armenian alphabet signifies God, and it is always present at the top of altars in every Armenian church. So we have the second portion of the iconography here, that the ark is not on the top of the mountain, but on a flat area beneath the summit of Greater Mount Ararat. Now here we're going back to the original, the first type of iconography, and this is in the Battle of Ağrı by Grigor Khanjian. And here you find the first type of iconography, that of the Southern Gorge, moving from the very bottom to the top of the mountain on the southern side of Greater Mount Ararat, and at the top of the gorge there is Noah's Ark. So Grigor Khanjian is producing both types of iconography. First, about the Southern Gorge extending throughout the mountain, from the bottom to the top of Greater Mount Ararat, with the Noah's Ark at the top of the Southern Gorge. And then the second portion of the iconography, where you have Noah's Ark resting on a flat area, located in a flat area beneath the summit of Greater Mount Ararat. Here is another contemporary Armenian postal stamp. And here you have what's emblematic of both iconographic traditions. First, you have the symbology of the Southern Gorge, going from the south to the north or from the bottom to the top of Greater Mount Ararat. And then you can see in the inset that Noah's Ark is positioned on a little flat area beneath the summit of Greater Mount Ararat. So again, these iconographic traditions continue again and again, no matter what you're talking about, ancient paintings to modern, to ancient maps, to modern paintings, to stamps, to modern iconography. Again, these two very interesting traditions pointing to the location of Noah's Ark. Now here's a final photograph of the satellite photograph of the southern side of Greater Mount Ararat and the Southern Gorge showing with a red dot. And just to refresh your memory. So let's review. First, Noah's Ark is very large. Nearly 175 meters in length. It is on the Southern Gorge, on the southern side of Mount Ararat, because only here there is enough room for the ark to be able to rest. It could rest on relatively flat ground here. And only here it would provide a peaceful descent for Noah, his family, and the animals. All other sides of Greater Mount Ararat and all around Lesser Mount Ararat would have been too small, too steep for the ark to rest, or for Noah, his family, and the animals to descend in peace. Now we have the old Armenian and European maps of Mount Ararat showing the ark is on a flat area under the summit of Mount Ararat, and Noah's ark is at the top of the Southern Gorge.